Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Void. I am your host tonight, Objectively Dan. This is the live call-in show where we talk about what people believe and why, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. For those of you who are just joining us because you just saw my appearance on Atheist Experience, welcome. This is another show that happens here at the Atheist Community of Austin, so stick around, have fun. It's a little different from what you might be used to. If you're used to watching Mad and some of those other personalities, kind of a different vibe. So glad you guys are joining us if you're doing that for the first time. Every single week, we always have a special guest on our program, and this week is no different. It is the indefatigable, the inimitable Anthony Magnabosco. Anthony, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Dan. It's good to be on your show again, man. Thanks for having me on.
Good. You were the second guest on the second episode of Truth Wanted. So you've been around for a while. I am going to refresh my browser here in just a second to help with this audio stuff that we're having at the front end, which is really, really great. But while I'm about to do that, Anthony, we should talk about the thing that we just did together, right?
Yeah, we were up in Austin. I drove up to Austin to be at the Faithless Forum. I had the opportunity to do a joint presentation with Dan on Street Epistemology. And this was, I think, the second time we did a presentation together, but this was like really enjoyable. There were about 40 people in the audience asking all sorts of questions. We shared some of the behind the scenes things between Dan and myself, like what was it like to interview him and then post the video online and then have him reach out afterwards, that type of stuff. And we had some really good questions from the audience too, like really good questions. So like, how do you start a conversation with somebody where you want to use street epistemology, not just with a stranger, but somebody that you value the relationship with, a family member or a friend. And then we got a lot of personal questions too, like, are you friends or do you keep in touch? What's that like? Those types of questions. So it was still good. Really good presentation. Oh, am I getting laggy right now?
I'm getting some choppiness on my end. I'm going to keep talking and probably refresh again in just a second. Hopefully you guys can still hear me.
Am I good?
Because
I can vamp if you need a refresh on your end.
I can hear you just fine. I think I'm getting some choppiness on my end with the video,
so
but it sounds like it sounds like the audio is getting okay though. So
yeah,
let's just to talk about that a bit. This, like you said, was the second one that we've done together. We've both done SE presentations. You obviously more so than I have. But I will say for myself, I think it was one of my favorite ones that we've ever done, that I've ever done, because we just got to talk about our experiences with it and people's responses to it, which I think is fascinating, because SE is at a point now, at least in the atheist community, in my experience, where a lot of people know about it, a lot of people have heard of it, and a lot of people have ideas about it, but they may not know its usefulness, they may not know its appropriateness, and they may not know, what are some of those kind of best practices. And some people have kind of these preconceived ideas about what it's supposed to be. For example, I hear a lot, and this comes from my friends in the heathen community, not talk heathen community. I'm talking about pagans, the pagan community, who will say, well, SE is just this, you're just like promoting scientism, you're just promoting rationalism, you're just promoting a specific worldview, and you're trying to question other people's worldviews and see if they match up with that worldview, which I don't think is the case. I think SE is a way to explore any kind of worldview. I think it's a good way to kind of be investigative about other people's worldviews and how to have a real meaningful conversation based off it, and not just, you know, scream and yell at each other, which is what happens half the time when you do talk about these kinds of topics. So I find an endless amount of usefulness for it. And I'm really glad that we both got to talk about it together, because this one was definitely more extemporaneous for the both of us. You know, we didn't get to go, we weren't too on script for it. But in case anyone is interested, this particular workshop was not recorded. But there are also ones that both Anthony and I have done on various channels. So you should definitely check those out in case you are interested. So yeah, did you have any other thoughts on that presentation? Because I thought it was a blast.
It was a blast. I did notice Seth was in the audience. Of course, he records all sorts of things, so I wouldn't be surprised if he recorded it. But to the best of my knowledge, nobody did record it, which is kind of a shame because it was such a good talk and the questions were really good. Maybe I could just speak a little bit about this idea of like how to use street epistemology or some of the challenges that we run into. SE, I think, probably in a way is sort of framed from the mindset of how do we identify your claim or your hypothesis? How do we clear up what your reasons are or your evidence? And then how are you testing or checking those reasons to see if they're good enough to be sure that something is true? So in a way, there is a scientific sort of bent to SE, but when I'm talking with somebody and I'm using SE, I want to understand how they're thinking about their beliefs. Now, it may not correspond to how I view beliefs and how beliefs should be justified and that type of thing, but my aspect or my views of it aren't really all that important. It's the person that I'm speaking with. So if I have somebody that's navigating reality in a completely different, interesting way that I am, I want to explore that with questions. So if you have objections to me asking questions about your beliefs, which I have heard, there are some people that think that that's somehow off limits, that you shouldn't be doing that. That itself is a fascinating discussion that I'd love to get into someday with people. But I don't think I've ever run into anyone in public who actually had that view. So that's what SE is. It's like taking yourself out of it, making it about your conversation partner so you can understand how they're reasoning about their thoughts.
Yes. And I think that points to another common misconception people have about SE, is that it's a rhetorical tool. In other words, you're asking rhetorical questions in order to make some kind of point. And I mean, obviously, you know, you're asking questions for a reason, right? Like you want to get an answer or a response, but you're not necessarily trying to convince somebody of something one way or the other. Again, you can use SE on beliefs that you can share with somebody else, but still you want to figure out the particular reasons why. For example, if you're talking to somebody, you know, I'm pro-choice. If I want to talk to somebody else about why they're pro-choice, they might have different reasons than I do. And you can use SE to kind of figure out what those reasons are, and why they think that they are good reasons to support that belief. So there's a multiplicity of ways that you can really use the method. And I think that's why I really like using SE. But, you know, Anthony, you've been doing this for people who aren't familiar with it. I mean, you've been championing SE for a couple of years now. You've been doing it for longer than anybody I know. And now you're wanting to take it to the next level. You have been starting an organization the surrounding street epistemology. So I want you to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Right. So I started going out and attempting to do SE from like 2014 on. I think I ran into you in 2015 maybe, and then we met like 2 years later, something like that. Right? Wasn't it 2015 when we first met? Anyways,
I think it was 2015. Yeah, it's hard to remember it now.
so yeah, I have been doing it for a while, and it's been evolving over time. I think we've become more responsible with the conversations that we're having and with the materials that we're putting out and how we're positioning the tool. So it's more open to people regardless of where you stand on any claim. But we also want to test what we're doing and develop materials to teach people what we're doing. And that takes organization, that takes structure. And you being a part of the ACA, you probably understand this. Like it became evident that we needed to form a nonprofit to start raising money and developing materials and this type of thing to legitimize it, to call people's attention to it, and to inspire people who are scientifically minded to study the effectiveness of what we do. Because it seems like, just based off my personal experience engaging with lots of people, it seems like there's something to it, but as you know, we as skeptics, we want something more than just our anecdotal experiences. So getting attention drawn to SE has been a big goal, so that we can find people willing to study it scientifically and see what's really happening. And that was the result of forming the organization Street Epistemology International. So if you just Google that, or I guess just Google it. We're on all sorts of different platforms. The organization is relatively small. Our board is comprised of half the board is in the United States, the other half are spread around the world. And we are catching the attention of people who like what we're doing and they want to fund it. And now it's time to get serious and start developing materials. The biggest thing that we're working on right now, I should probably point out, is a self-directed course for people at their leisure to download materials or go online and teach yourself how to use this tool set when you find yourself in a situation where somebody makes a claim. And I think springing off of that, Dan, what's going to happen is we will likely develop instructor-led materials and web apps and all sorts of other things, maybe a certification program for instructors so that you could be SE certified, maybe to actually give a course, or maybe knock on a business and teach them this approach. The sky's the limit. And I think the organization was the necessary step to get to the next stage.
So what is the goal for the organization? Is the goal for the organization to try to teach SE to everybody? Is it to teach individuals? Is it to teach organizations? What do you envision the end goals be?
We didn't really make a distinction on like who we want to teach it to. I just anybody. Like if you're in a business or you're an individual, or maybe you're a teacher who sees the value of it or something, we want everyone to recognize the value of the tool set and see opportunities to use it in their careers or their lives, and then just go forward. So a major goal of the organization is to develop materials that helps promote the practice of street epistemology.
Excellent. And so are these materials, do you have a structure as far as how you want to divvy them out? In other words, obviously you want to be able to ascend instructors for places. I know that that's one of the goals. Is the idea to charge people to take classes, or charge people just to download the materials, or do you have any of that stuff figured out yet?
We're still kind of figuring that out. The self-directed course will be free, and we've been working, myself and a team have been working for the last year plus developing free materials where you could at your leisure learn the approach. But probably what will happen is we're going to probably need to hire somebody to develop professional teaching materials. That's going to be expensive. We'll need to charge for that. But those funds, I think, will be used to actually do the studying part of it, actually use it to promote SE and find people willing to scientifically explore what's happening in an SE conversation and what's the long-term impact of it. Do people remember the talk a month later, a year later? Are they lowering their confidence? Are they interested in the approach? Like what is a success exactly too? These are questions that we need to sort of identify. But in order to do any of that, we need a little bit of funding. So probably in the next month or two, as we're rolling out these modules publicly, right now we're dropping a few of them for testing purposes, but we're going to probably start dripping out the modules alongside of a fundraiser to do a big push to raise some money to get this thing off the ground.
Nice. Yeah. And this is a good point too, because people often ask me, obviously the people who are interested in this kind of thing, they're very interested in science in general. And they want to know, like, what is the science behind SE? Are there any published studies that have demonstrated any kind of results? How do you define those results? What does that look like? I mean, what's the consensus there that you know of? If any, is there any? Because
there's no studies to my knowledge. I just saw a post, I think, on the SE Discord, which would be a great place for anybody to go if you're interested in practicing it or listening in on conversations or asking questions about ethics or whatever. Somebody literally just asked that. And to my knowledge, there are no studies about SE, but we've been actively trying to find somebody to do that. And we've had a few false starts. Some people reach out, they're interested, and then sort of they go away. I'm not exactly sure what's up with that, but things are happening with SE where I think you won't be able to sort of ignore what we're doing anymore, to the point where we will have to study it. Like it will gain the attention of people to study it. But at the moment, there's no good studies and there's no studies. But here's the thing, like there's a lot of similarities, I think, between street epistemology, which is this idea of asking questions to help the person that you're speaking with reflect on their views and think about their thinking, essentially. There seems to be some similarities between SE and cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, like motivational interviewing and that type of stuff, where there are studies. So maybe we can learn a little bit from those studies, but as we're developing this course, we're discovering really hard questions that we're trying to answer ourselves. Like, how is SE similar and different to psychotherapy techniques?
Yeah.
We're talking to experts to understand this so that we can put this into the course, but we're still learning. So we're teaching and learning at the same time, which is kind of a weird spot to be. But I don't think we're getting too far ahead of our skis on it. Like, I think we're progressing nicely and getting people's attention, but still developing the materials, because it seems like something is happening. There's something unique happening to the person that you're speaking with and using the questions with. And I think there's something happening to you as the questioner. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but like
I have noticed it. Definitely. It's like, SE itself is almost like an amalgamation of different techniques. Like, obviously it gets its roots in the Socratic method, right? But also you can kind of draw those comparisons to CBT, as you said. And it's sort of almost interdisciplinary in its approach, which is weird, because like I think this is like, like every organization in the world wants to figure out what's the best possible marketing strategy to figure out, how they can get people to best buy their odds. And they're going to try different channels. They're going to try different things. But like, no one company is going to say like, oh, we have to do this every single time. I mean, they're going to have like traditions, but they're always going to be open to new ideas as they come out, as, more research on things come out. And I kind of see SE in like a similar boat. Like, people have been using the Socratic method for a long time. This is like kind of I don't want to say guerrilla group of people doing the Socratic method, but almost like, I mean, up until this point, an unorganized sort of free association of people who are kind of interested in similar techniques and methods and trying to figure out what's the best practices therein, sort of like a collective up to this point, which is an interesting thing.
And that's been one of the strengths of SE, I think, over the years, is that we've been just around the world, people have been discovering the videos or books talking about SE and then using it and then sharing their experiences. And then it's been this community effort of identifying what seems to be effective and what seems to be problematic. And it's been this sort of iterative process. And I hope we never lose sight of that. Like, even if we did develop a course or instructional materials or a certification program, the thing that will keep SE sharp is people using it and then sharing their experiences back to the community, so that I think the nonprofit might be one of many organizations in the future, but who knows? We need to kind of keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the community, so that we can identify those tools that work the best and try to bake them into the approach.
Yeah.
And I'm not aware of anything, like maybe there's something similar in some of these psychotherapy techniques, but this is, like you said, guerrilla. Like, there is something sort of raw, and that's the street part of it. We are lay people who just like talking to people, and we're sick of arguing. And we've been sharing our successes and failures in a community that's been moving this thing forward in a really cool way. And I hope that never goes away.
Yeah, I think I wonder, there's never going to be a church of SE where you have to follow the specific dogma of this particular branch of SE in order for it to be real SE. I don't know if it's ever going to get to that point. I think it's always going to be people. I hope it's people that will continue to just iterate on that process, right?
Well, I think people will iterate. I wouldn't be surprised if we did start seeing, factions is too strong of a word, but variations of SE. Like, no, I've even heard people say, no, I've even heard people say you should never use SE on political claims, which is just crazy to me. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's
like people would say, well, no, you should only use it with religious people who value faith or something. Like, that's silly too.
No, yeah, that definitely.
But yeah, who knows? I mean, hopefully it's a collaborative thing, even if there are splits. But we'll see. I feel like I've got a front row seat to this whole thing. It's just been It's been so cool.
Not just the front row seat to your credit, Anthony, you've been the primary motivator in so many people trying the method, obviously myself included, but you've done a whole lot for this community. I just want to say on a personal note, I am incredibly proud of the work that you've been putting into this new org, and I wish you well on your ventures with that. And I'm excited to see what you do with the project and what other folks on the board and stuff are doing with it, because I'm personally very fascinated in seeing what happens with it. So with that out of the way, of course, with that out of the way, I want to get to some calls tonight. What do you say, Anthony? Want to talk to some folks at home?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. What the hell? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. We got you for the next hour, Anthony.
You got me for the next hour. And I think I'm going to be on the Discord afterwards to talk to people.
Yes.
So if you can't get through, then make sure you get on the ACA Discord so that we can talk.
Yes.
But I got to say, I've had so many conversations with people, I hate to even say this, it wouldn't be the end of the world if I never had to talk with anybody ever again about a deeply held belief. I've done it so much. I don't know if any hosts, I wonder what Matt thinks about that or you think about that. Cause I don't know, at some point you're like, okay, I think I'm done exploring deeply held beliefs. Now let me give people the tools to do this. Cause it's almost too much.
That's an interesting thing. I feel like this is a total tangent, but I feel like almost sometimes as a person who is educated in a particular topic, you feel the need to share that to somebody else, right? Like if you know a lot about how the coronavirus vaccine works, I would understand why somebody would feel the need to tell everybody they know about this vaccine to make sure that they get it, because there's a stake there that happens if you don't get it. There's risks involved. And sometimes I have felt that way with activism in general, right? Because it's like, I want to make sure that effective change is happening. And I feel like that if I'm not going to do it, nobody's going to do it, right? Which is not true, right? The other people are will pick it up. But I understand what you mean about feeling that sense of burnout a little bit of, here we go, talking about quantum physics again. Geez. Well,
right.
That's
and I mean, no disrespect to anyone that's going to be calling in or anything, but yeah, it's like, it's time to shift gears. It's time to move on. I love having conversations still. And I did over Thanksgiving with family and friends. And that's like a whole different gear shift, but I want to shift to more strategic stuff, making contacts outside of the atheist and skeptic community to introduce them to these tools.
Yeah.
People who are promoting science communication, I think, need to be aware of this tool. So
if anybody deserves to do a break from SC, it would be you. I would say. I think that's fair. I think most people would say that, but that's good. I'm glad that you feel yourself in a position where you feel like you can still at least educate people on the topic, because I do definitely think people still need to hear this. It's still in the budding phases of.
Don't get me wrong. I see myself doing this to some degree to the end of my life. Unless I discover that it's harmful or ineffective or something along those lines, which I see no indication of, but. Yeah, I mean, there's something really to it. I love it. And I put in a lot of time every day to try to promote it. But one-on-one conversations, they're nice, they're fun. And now this is cool because we can reach a lot of people in a one-on-one conversation. So this I love. This is a good use of my time.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I'm glad you feel like you're doing a good use of your time when we're hanging out together. But I'm excited for you. Like I said, I'm excited to see what you do next. So without further ado, we should be getting to calls. But before we do that, Anthony, we have to thank our patron of the week. That's right, folks. Every single week, we thank a special patron from our Patreon. That's patreon.com/truthwanted. All of our patrons get a shout out, but we always do one at a time here just to make sure that they know that they are special. And all of those donations goes towards the show and making it happen. I do not personally receive any of that, nor do any of the other hosts of Truth Wanted. It all goes towards making the shows happen every single week. So this week's special patron of the week is Eugene Hammonds. Thank you so much, Eugene Hammonds, for donating to Truth Wanted. And thank you to everyone else who donates on patreon.com/truthwanted. You guys rock, and you guys are the reason why we do what we do. So thank you guys so much. And now, Anthony, I believe it's time for us to get to some calls. So are you officially ready to go?
I am ready. I'm motivated and ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so this first one I think is a really, really good one to start with. So I want to start with this one, and I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Is it Aelora? Aelora? They, them pronouns?
First go.
Is that right?
Yeah,
okay, good.
Yeah.
Hi, Aelora. How are you doing?
Sorry. Good. I didn't think I'd get on first. It's really a pleasure to talk with you guys. Thank you so much.
Excellent, excellent. So yes, I think you have a great question. So go ahead and ask it to us if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I personally have mental illnesses that I struggle with, and epistemology was one of my favorite subjects in college. And I always wondered, and I've even tried sort of myself, but I've always wondered if street epistemology is a tool that people with mental illnesses like anxiety or depression or whatever it is can sort of use to help themselves maybe not get out of their mental illnesses, but at least cope with. And I was kind of curious if you guys had ever thought of that or run into that, or what your experiences were with that.
My first sense is to say, well, of course SE can help with that. I can help with everything. And I have to somewhat temper my enthusiasm for the approach, especially if it's a medical condition like that. Speaking from my own personal experience, I suffered with nervousness, anxiety, actual like tics. Like, I don't really talk about this publicly, but I've never been more confident and self-assured and calm talking with other people than I have been after having used this approach. Now, maybe it's just because I've had so many talks and I could have used any approach and overcome that, but it's helped me. It's helped me become less triggered when I encounter somebody with whom I disagree. Now, I don't know if that really falls under the umbrella of mental illness. I'm not exactly sure what you're speaking about specifically, but I have seen some personal growth in using an approach that sort of helps you view the person separate from the belief. And when you do that for other people, you tend to do it for yourself too. You start realizing, okay, I'm Anthony and I just happen to be holding these beliefs about reality. And why are they in there? And that's kind of helped me become grounded and more stoic and less emotionally reactive in tense situations. That's about as much as I can share with you, but well, I'm tempted to go further and say, well, of course this will help you. I don't know. I don't know anyone really that has suffered from mental illness and then has discovered a similar approach where you're getting into the epistemology of how somebody is sure that they can think something to be the case. I'm not exactly sure, but it's helped me personally, and I've seen and heard other people, but again, it's anecdotal.
Yeah. I would say that, street epistemology is, while it does, I would say is inspired or maybe tries to borrow techniques from CBT and other similar types of therapies, in and itself is not a therapy because it's not licensed by anybody that says this is a therapy, this is what's going to help people. But I would agree that, at least for myself too, Anthony, it has been immensely helpful for my own personal life. And I can anecdotally speak to the conversations I've had with other people who have said that it has helped them as well. I would say as a baseline for the way that people generally talk to each other, especially when it comes to controversial topics like politics and religion, people in general are really bad about it. Just don't have a solid framework or a good methodology to talk to people. They just kind of throw whatever happens, it sticks. And that's how you get these gigantic Twitter threads of people just throwing ad hominems at each other. Nothing gets done. Everybody gets really mad. And there's just no sense of progress being made. With SE, there is at least, if not the illusion of progress, in many cases, actual progress being made in the differences between people's beliefs. So I believe there is an advantage there. But as a tool for mental health, I would say I would leave it on the experts to really make that declaration themselves. While I'm comfortable with saying it has been personally helpful and anecdotally helpful for others, for myself, which the thing I don't talk about, Anthony, is that I have, especially recently, have struggled a lot with anxiety. And I am not the best person to talk to about myself when it comes to those kinds of things. Sometimes it takes an outside person to talk to me and make me realize, oh, I'm thinking about this irrationally. This isn't actually a rational point of thought of, and those techniques are great for doing that. But I'd say that's what I'd be comfortable saying about it.
Yeah, totally. I really appreciate your guys' answers, because I also have anxiety, and I've even caught myself kind of using those tools of like, oh, I have this belief that, I did something wrong, but why do I feel this way? Like, what evidence do I have to actually substantiate this?
Right.
So, yeah, I was just curious if anybody had had that experience, and obviously none of us are mental health professionals, and I'm not trying to get anybody sued. But I really appreciated your guys' answers.
Before you go, I wanted to add one thing. So in the development of the SE course, we're working, one of the modules is called What is Street Epistemology? And there's a learning objective where we're comparing SE to other engagement techniques like motivational interviewing, CBT. And we've talked to a few people who are familiar with SE, and they're also clinical psychotherapists. And one interesting thing that's come up, and it blew my mind, is that the psychotherapist is engaging with our patient to reveal what the patient will accept as a solution. And in SE, we're exploring how you determine that you can be confident that something is factually true. So it's conceivable, I don't want to go out too far on a limb here, but it's conceivable that when we're doing SE, we might actually be talking about realistic solutions. Whereas maybe in a psychotherapy technique, you're revealing solutions that might appease the patient, but may not be grounded in reality necessarily. And I'm not entirely sure, like maybe that's the best thing for the patient who's suffering with mental illness. Like, okay, I pray to the God and I get a sense of comfort, and it's helping me cope through this difficult time. That could be a really useful thing in a clinical setting. But if you were to meet someone doing street epistemology, and hopefully they were being very cautious and feeling you out and making sure that we didn't go beyond your level of comfort, but we would likely be exploring how you can be so sure that what you think is true is really true to some self-reported degree of confidence. And that is a big distinction between the two. Like, I think in SE, we're really kind of exploring realistic perspectives of reality that you can justify to your own standard. And you may not necessarily get that in a psychotherapy setting. I'm not exactly sure, but this is all new ground for us. We're uncovering this stuff as we're coming up with the course. Like, people are in for a real treat when this course comes out, because we're revealing things that we haven't even considered. And we've been doing this for years. I was telling somebody that over the last year, I haven't been doing any conversations. I've been strictly working on this course with experts in SE from around the world. And I've learned so much more about this approach than if I had had 1,000 or maybe even 10,000 conversations. I really think I've learned so much more about the approach and the responsibility, maybe even perhaps we have from wielding a tool like SE that has so many similarities to psychotherapy techniques. So we're being very cautious. We're building in a lot of checks and balances. Like the SE of today is so much different than the SE of tomorrow. But I feel like I'm rambling, so let me dump it over to Dan.
Yeah, I gotcha. It is a thing we have to absolutely be cautious of, because the implications of the conclusions that you might come to during SE are life-changing. They are life-changing, right? Like for some of those kinds of topics, not every kind of topic. If we're talking about, well, I think chocolate is the best ice cream flavor, right? That may not have like life-altering implications besides a different choice when you go to Baskin Robbins. But like, if we're talking about, well, this God that I once believed in for the first, 20 years of my life that I no longer believe in, well, you might start, going on call-in shows and start talking to other people, about stuff. So that, there's some real changes that happen with this stuff. So you get that it's a possibility, maybe it's happened once, but I still stand to this point that, look, these kinds of conversations of people's beliefs, whether it comes to politics, religion, whatever, these are things that we happen to do every day. And so, like, I don't think having an organized methodology by which to pursue that is a bad thing in and of itself. But it is something where you do have to be cautious sometimes, and context is going to matter with a lot of these kinds of conversations. So, we're and there's still edges to this that I don't know the answer to. I don't think Anthony knows the answer to, that we'll have to figure out in the future. But it's a great call. We have a lot of other callers that we want to get to tonight. So, Aelora, thank you so much for calling in, and appreciate you being the first call of the night. I hope you have a great rest of your night. So any other thoughts you wanted to add on that? No? Okay. All right. Sounds good. Let's go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead. And there might be a delay here. Let's go ahead and go to our next person here. All right. We're going to talk to Barrie. Barrie is calling in from New Zealand. Barrie from New Zealand, you're live on Truth Wanted. What is up?
Yeah, hi guys. Good to talk to you again. I noticed you had Anthony on, so can I just ask a preliminary question to him?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sure. I've looked at quite a lot of the videos, including the ones with Dan. I just think it's amazing as a technique. I'm a teacher myself, and one thing I've noticed, having been trained to teach, is that you can give the theories to all sorts of people, right? And you can train them to teach and go out and do it. But some people, nevertheless, don't have the aptitude because of perhaps some fundamental, I don't want to say flaw, but they find it really difficult to do in practice. They tend to be tone deaf. I'm wondering, have you found that to be a weakness in some cases with SE? I mean, can you teach everybody to do it literally?
Great question. You can teach everybody to do it, but whether they actually do it is another story. And that's been a big goal of the course, is to figure out, how do we simplify these tools and make them really understandable and lower the bar for trying it? Because I think once you try it and once you become confident and more confident in your ability to listen, to ask questions, to repeat back what you're hearing, and keep driving down to the how are they confirming that they have good reasons for thinking that something is true while maintaining rapport? Like, there's lots of little things that you kind of have to keep in mind as you're progressing. So it's doable, but it's a bigger challenge for some people than others, just like any technique. And it was really hard for me at first. If you look at the older videos, even years before I met Dan, 2 years before, I was arguing, I was giving counter apologetics, I was educating people and preaching about how faulty their reasoning was. But when you do it enough, when you practice enough, then it starts dawning on you how to get better at it. But yeah, there are some people that you would think would be so good at SE or have been involved in SE for the longest time still struggle with it because they can't seem to take themselves out of it and make it about their conversation partner. And it may very well be a personality trait that's getting in the way. I don't know how you can overcome that other than maybe recognizing it and talking with people and practicing it and starting really slow and just kind of gradually going for there. But there may be people who will just never get it. That they're probably out there.
I would also add, there's also going to be a difference in culture. If you do this in one country versus do it in another country, there might be different kinds of connotations to the kinds of questions that you're asking. And so that's going to cause some kinds of barriers of entry too. I mean, it's already intimidating enough to talk about some of these subjects, right? Like, these are not the average conversations that you do have with people on the street. If you're literally doing, these conversations on the street, let alone it's not ones where, again, people feel oftentimes comfortable talking about when they do have those conversations, because you don't know what a stranger is like. You don't know what they're going to say. And people often will kind of temper themselves even in their own conversations. And one thing I will add too is, I see this particularly with Anthony. I see this with other SE content creators. I've heard this about myself sometimes, where people will comment and they'll say, wow, these guys are so patient. They're so patient. I could never do this. I could never have the patience to, do what they do. And to me, my only response to that is, well, the only reason why I think you see folks like Anthony, you see folks like myself kind of engage in the way that we do, is because there's been practice. Like, you really do have to practice at this, because this is not a natural way to talk to people. And when I say natural way, I mean, it's not the way that we're used to. It's not the way that most of us grew up talking to people in a way. And so I even catch myself sometimes giving responses and things where I wish I could have gone back differently, even though I've been doing this for a couple of years now. And I'm sure Anthony could probably say the same thing when he's had conversations. So it's always going to be an ongoing, ever learning thing for some people too. There's not going to be an end point where you're like, oh, suddenly I'm just amazing at this and everything I do is going to be perfect, you know? So it does take time to build these skills.
If I could just add too, Barrie, that there's several different variations of how you could do SE, and we're working on module 4 also, which is called, the working title is Preparing to Do SE. And we've identified maybe 4, 5, 6 different variations of how you could do it. There's the very common street version. There's the call-in show version, like we see on Dan's show. There's the you're in an Uber, the driver says something. It's sort of an organic in the moment thing. You could do that. Or like at Thanksgiving, I was surrounded by family members, and like I didn't want to bring out my whiteboard and my timer. Like I did a variation of it where I was sharing my observations of my thoughts. Like, you know, the guy was explaining how he tripped over a hose at the gas station and was thinking about suing the gas station. I was like, oh, I could use SE here. So I modified my approach and I said, you know, I'd be interested in what a lawyer would think about your situation. Like, how many times have you been to the gas station and are you familiar with the location? And so we were still exploring his reasoning process, which is all that SE is, but we were going about it in a conversational, friendly way. So what I think is going to happen is when people start realizing the value of SE, but understanding that they're not going to ever go out on the street and do it, there's going to be a serious effort, and we're seeing it in the course already, to modify the approach to make it more accessible to people who don't think that they're going to be good at it or they don't know how to start it. So all this stuff is coming. Like we're on the very, very beginning threshold of this thing. And I think we're going to start seeing some really clever ways of exploring deeply held beliefs with informed consent where you're driving to the epistemology and they're grateful for having had the talk afterwards. Like it's going to come. We're still kind of feeling our way in the dark on this a little bit.
Definitely. But, you know, Barrie said that was the preliminary question. So now I want to know, Barrie, what's the real question you wanted to ask us?
Yeah, oh my God, that was such a great answer. I was just waiting for more and more of it. Brilliant, guys. I just, in reaction to what you just said, I came across a street preacher the other day who was using a set of cards, which were in a sequential order, and he was coming across random people in the street, you know, and engaging with them. And I thought, this is actually bogus methodology because he's got a predetermined end card that he wants to get you to. Whereas SE to me seems a lot more open, and it's far more based on what the interlocutor themselves thinks and has to say, and it's far more interactive and real, organic, you know. Whereas his approach was literally wooden with a bunch of cards, you know. So anyway, I'll get to my question. I framed it around the prosperity gospel. We have a group here in New Zealand which has been quite controversial. It's called the Destiny Church, although a lot of people call them Density for a laugh. And their preacher is a man called Tamaki. He's been around about 20 years, and he comes out quite often with controversial statements. You're probably familiar with a lot of it. I mean, whenever there's a major earthquake, it's due to gay people, which I thought about that and I thought, well, actually, you know, if I was young and I was working out my sexuality, that would make me want to be gay because I'd have superpowers. It'd be pretty cool. But he doesn't mean it in a nice way, of course. You know, so gay people cause earthquakes. The mainstream media is a form of witchcraft. He declared himself a bishop at one point and insisted that his followers buy a $400 ring. And what really annoys me about it is their demographic is essentially people on welfare, working class, people just getting by, who $400 is like almost a week's wages, you know. Meanwhile, he's driving around on a Harley, he's got a mansion, he goes on cruises. He's also got into politics, set up a political party. At one point, I think it was 2004, he said that he would be running the country within 4 years. Well, of course, that didn't happen. At the moment, he's leading the anti-vax crusade in New Zealand. They had a demonstration in my hometown about an hour ago. Now, the media have done a good job at debunking him, I think. They've focused on him quite well. but and he always tops the least preferred New Zealander list. They always come up with these lists. So I'm not too worried in a sense. But on the other hand, where I live, they had a very strong presence. I encounter these people on a weekly basis, and so I can't ignore them the way that you could in other places, I guess. I guess what I'm asking here is, because I do encounter them, and I do meet them on the street, and they're friends of friends and so on. If I was going to use, say, an SE approach to them, what are some of the things that I could do? Do I go for some of that more, controversial stuff, say about the gay thing, the prophecies that don't come true, or do I how would I do it in particular with their outlook as a prosperity gospel thing?
Would you like me to?
It's great, Anthony. Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it seems like every country has that, because there's a fellow on our team who's out of Australia, and he describes something very similar. And I know in Dallas they're still meeting on a weekly basis, or there's a big contingent that's going out, and they're really into QAnon. So it seems like maybe it's always been there, but maybe it's just more evident today that there are these groups of people who are falling for these things, or they're really invested in these beliefs. How do you reach them? Maybe, I think, is your question. Where do you start? And if you're encountering them, well, that's a good thing. That would be one of my solutions or recommendations, is to start a talk with them and try to build a little rapport and a connection, and explain to them that you want to understand why they think that this stuff is true. And it could be really tempting to chase the things, like you mentioned, they're against homosexuals or something like that. Like, that might be the thing that you want to go after, but it may not have any bearing on why they're convinced that this thing is true, or that they believe this leader. So you really need to ideally sit down with them, like find a quiet spot, introduce yourself, give a little bit of a background, maybe even ask them, do you mind if I ask you some questions to explore how you're thinking about this stuff? Because what you want to do is have rapport and drive down to how they're concluding that their reasoning is solid. And going after the things that are your pet issues that you think they'll find convincing if you could just argue it properly is probably one of the biggest mistakes that you can make. You need to actually have them reveal their reasoning and what convinced them. And then you kind of know where to go. You have to go where they take you, but you won't know where to go if you don't ask them questions. So it's going to be an investment, and it might be really frustrating, because you could have a really good talk with one person, see them 3 weeks later, and they may be just as convinced that it's true. It's going to probably have to be a repetitive, iterative process that is going to take a lot of time and effort. But maybe you can have a few friends to learn this with you, or introduce them to the concept of SE themselves, where they could be looking into it. But there's no quick fix, maybe there is a quick fix. I'm not aware of any, and SE isn't a quick fix. It's going to take several conversations, building trust, and getting down to how they're reasoning, being a mirror so that they can reflect on how they're processing these claims that this person is making, and how they would ever discover that they were mistaken. That's the approach that I would go, but it's not going to be a quick fix. And you might have more success if you can find a few people to help you out and have repeat conversations with some of these people.
Yeah. Rapport is very, very critical to seeing that change happen incrementally. If that's something that you're particularly interested in, or if that's something that could happen naturally, whatever happens, if you have the opportunity to actually see these people once a week, that might be a really good thing, because that means that you would actually have the time to invest in some of those people's lives and really have conversations with them. Whereas, if Anthony might have talked to him for one time, he may have planted a seed, maybe two, but I guarantee that more conversations on those kinds of topics are probably going to open more doors than even just one. So that might be, a hidden good thing there to that. But, I echo what Anthony says. Building that rapport is really, really good, and figuring out what really drives those beliefs. Because I think that's a really critical thing that I first discovered with SE, which was that you don't want to attack stuff necessarily that's most interesting to you, or what you think is personally convincing for you, or what helped with you, because you're not that person. And if you are making those assumptions, if, for example,
oh, you're a Christian. Well, why do you think that, what do you think about Noah's Ark? Like, why do you think that a boat was built and all these animals? So, okay, there are millions of Christians that don't give a flying fuck about Noah's Ark and has nothing to do with their beliefs. If you start with those kinds of critical, assumptions there, it's going to go downhill real fast because they're going to think that, oh, you're judging them in some sort of way. So whatever, you really got to figure out the heart of their beliefs and then figure out the methodology in the heart of that. That is really the golden thing there. But I tell you, even though I find it easier to have conversations with strangers than I do with friends, the friends that I know, I think I've made the most personal impact on versus doing stuff on this show is because I've been able to invest in sort of those long-term relationships. So yeah, definitely. If you can, I'd say, yeah, go for it. See what happens. Because what's the worst thing that happens, right? They continue doing the stuff that they're doing, which we both would agree is super harmful, not just to the world, but to themselves. So maybe if there's a chance for change, I would say, why not try? So
yeah, if you have the time, if you have the time to have those conversations with those folks repetitively, like when I was going out and doing SE, I would try to go to the same location and have multiple conversations with people because I wanted to see what was happening over time. And I was noticing changes over time, but it takes effort. And here's the other thing too, is you don't have to be sneaky about it or cagey. You can say, I'm fascinated that you believe this stuff and I want to understand. And I actually want to challenge you too, but I want to be fair about it. I want to be respectful. Can you help me understand what's bringing you to this? And you could be the guy who shows up, the person who shows up and engages with them. Oh, there's Barrie again, right? Depending on how you carry yourself, you could actually be really helpful in that situation, but it's an effort. It will take a little bit of effort on your part if you have the ability to do it. But that's what I was thinking, like get a few friends to go out there with you and just be sort of, not even be the voice of reason, but sort of you're being the mirror to how they're reasoning.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
And just consistently do that. So, okay, now when we talked last, you were saying this. Do you still think that? Or what did you think about the conversation that we had last week? They probably don't get a lot of that. They probably get a lot of people laughing at them, ridiculing them, and they're probably sick of it. That they would probably be really excited to have somebody who's listening to them and challenging them with questions.
Yes, I agree. Anyway, Barrie, I'd love to give you a chance to respond. Unfortunately, we're really pressed for time here.
Yeah,
we have a lot of callers.
I know.
We're
got like
kind of
2
going
callers.
on. I know. But so I'm going to go ahead and let you go for this call. But Barrie, thank you so much for calling and giving a great question, great 2 questions there that we got to answer. So we have a lot of people on the line. I want to try to get to everybody tonight. So I'm going to try to speed up the pace just a little bit. I don't know if it's just because we were just on HP or probably because you're on, Anthony, but thank you so much to everybody who's calling in. You guys are awesome. Before we get to our next caller, though, we are going to show our mid-show promo. So check this out.
You got to get the clothes off. So I'll start taking them off you, and that kind of cues her. Now she's like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna like transition smoothly into taking her clothes off,
Joining me today is a special guest, Pico the cat. Pico has not been on camera in a long time, and that's because he likes to get on my equipment and get in the way.
He is working for Seaman Cardona,
Yes.
and he's bringing the highest quality piglet producing products to market.
What do you mean you can? What do you mean you can read minds and raise the dead?
I can put my hands on people, pray on them, speak in tongues, and they come back.
Okay, well, I don't have a dead person to try this out on. I want to know.
You're gonna do the show with like an oxygen mask on?
Yeah.
And we're just gonna have to do it that way.
Dan, I am your father, Dan.
Oh God, no.
I love those interstitials. Those are so good.
They're so good. They're so good every time. And yes, the prospect of Matt Dillahunty being my father is a very scary one. I would not like that at all. But anyway, yeah, definitely go check out those other shows if you haven't already. Some of you probably have, and that's why you're here. So thank you again to overdue listeners. So let's go ahead and get to another call. Again, so many great topics that we can talk to people about. I'm going to want to talk to, oh my goodness, Jake from Texas. Jake from Texas, you are next
on Truth Wanted. What is going on?
Hey guys, thanks so much for taking my call. I just wanted to do a friendly quick disclaimer. I have ADHD. If I ramble, be like, "Hey Jake," and interrupt me at any given time. And
Will do, Jake.
Thing I was gonna, yeah. And the second thing I was gonna ask is, or state, is I 7 years ago was a seminary student. 2 years in, took all my foreign languages, dropped out of seminary for money reasons, and then eventually deconverted. Mostly actually through, it started with Anthony's channel, and I actually remember. I don't know if at that time, Dan, if you had already deconverted, but I remember seeing that episode before you had been involved in the show. And so just wanted to thank you guys for demonstrating doxastic openness. It was really, it's probably the most fundamental thing for me as far as not just atheism, because people can arrive at different stuff all the time, but just actually critically evaluating, because I would, in hindsight, consider myself very doxastically closed.
Well, thank you so much, Jake.
Alternate stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very kind. It's definitely Anthony doing the brunt of the work there. Like I said, he's been on this for a while, so props to him. If it wasn't for him, neither of us would be having this conversation. So please, by all means, go ahead with your question.
Yeah. So Converse, one, in relation to my main thing is, I guess the bullet point, and we can decide which direction we want to go. Mine is capitalism's selling point is equality of opportunity, but I believe that it's failing, and that socialism or social programs that border on socialism is the most persuasive answer to that problem. And the second part is I have tried to have this conversation with my father, mostly just to discuss worldview. And I think I have found it difficult he is a particular example of difficult people who are he's smart enough to identify that a question has a certain directions that you're trying to point. And the mere question often makes him angry. And so it's just this huge doxastically closed event where it's like you can almost, I know he's smarter than the things that he argues and gets upset about. He just, it's hard to model for him what that looks like when I think certain types of people, especially ones that you care about, feel the freedom to kind of kick up dust and be rude, or maybe they know street epistemology enough to be like, haha, you're not going to trick me. And so I guess that's my twofold thing. We can kind of pick which way we want to go on that.
Definitely. So I saw that the call screener, mostly they focused on just attempting SE conversations with your father and father being guarded. So, and for the sake of time, because we have other callers too, I think we should focus on that. So, Anthony, do you have, any thoughts on that?
I do. Yeah. So whenever I run, if I'm having a conversation with somebody, if I've noticed that they become defensive or they're guarded about the whole process where you're questioning their views in the first place, that's usually the indication to me that I need to actually take a step back and go broader. So rather than talking about capitalism or socialism or politics, I've found that it could be useful to just have broader conversations about what does it mean to be wrong? Or when was the last time that you changed your mind? Were there advantages to changing your mind? Or what was that process like? Was it painful? Where you're talking about beliefs in general, and you're not even talking about a specific claim. It's a meta discussion about belief formation and belief revision. And sometimes when the person is explaining how they think about belief revision and belief change or those types of broader concepts, they start bringing up topics to help explain how they traverse that difficulty or something along those lines. And then that could be a really good entry point to actually talking about a subject, but now you're looking at through the lens of this larger concept. I found that really helpful. So that's a really good tip, I think, for your viewers, not just yourself, Jake, but if you're talking to somebody and you're getting stuck, you're probably too narrowly focused. Take a big step back and even ask yourself, what are my goals? And you can even share your goals. Like, Dad, I really like talking with people to explore their reasoning and how they're so sure. And is their confidence justified, and all these types of things. And it really takes the pressure off of both of you, because now you're not talking about these really sensitive topics and you're talking in broader terms. You might want to give that a try.
It's such an excellent tip. Excellent tip. Yeah. So many people go into conversations and they think, if I haven't changed this person's mind by the end of this conversation, then I have failed somehow, or that it wasn't a worthwhile conversation. But that is not true in the slightest. In fact, I never go into a conversation, especially on this show, with the intention of knowing that by the end of the call, somebody's going to completely change their mind. It was actually really funny. If you watched last episode of Atheist Experience, Matt had talked to a guy, and the guy at the end of the call was like, okay, yeah, you're right, I was wrong. And I was like, that's really funny, because that literally never happens. Like 99% of the time, that doesn't happen, right? Because as humans, we're just naturally just very defensive, and we have to kind of think things through on our own time sometimes outside of a conversation to really fully understand what we're looking at. So Anthony's point is excellent. Sometimes you have to take it away, even if it's a subject you're really interested in talking about. You have to kind of pull back a bit and see, okay, what's the bigger picture here? What's the methodologies being used? Can we talk about those methodologies? Can we talk about what it means to have a justified belief, right? And see where that takes you. Excellent advice.
You can have the best questions lined up and ready to go because you watched all these SE videos and you know the typical path, right? You get to the claim, you figure out the real reason. You assess how they're checking the quality of that reason. But what tends to happen is we forget some of the basics. Like, do I have trust with this person? Is there some bridge building that needs to happen before we even have a discussion? Do we need to start more broad and maybe start narrowing in? Because sometimes I think this happens too much. We want to start on the claim before the legwork has been done beforehand. And sometimes you have a relationship with somebody where you can just get right to the claim and start hitting them with questions. But many times, like if you're noticing resistance, that's usually the indication that you're not ready yet. Like there's some work that you need to do.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you're right, because literally every engagement I've had thus far has been like when the questions start getting asked, and usually I try to be as neutral as possible. I think at one point was like, he just kind of got flustered and was like, I think you think I'm stupid. And I was like, no, Dad, like I just told you, like, this is what I like doing. And I think maybe there's also some just modeling behavior that I have traditionally avoided, which is cropping up to be difficult.
Yeah, because if you start talking if you've never done SE with somebody before, or you don't have a history of doing it with that person, and suddenly you start talking like somebody that does SE, like it's noticeably different, right? So it sounds like, oh, this person, they got a thing here, right? They've got like a studied thing, and they're trying to flip something on you. That's what I thought when I first talked with Anthony. Okay. That was my assumption. I was like, what's going on here? Like,
but I was out there with a camera, and the rumors on campus were that I was out there and all this stuff. So sometimes there's like, you have to do a little damage control, and like, you can just say like just reveal everything that you're doing. Just be honest and transparent. Like if you do that and be authentic, like, Dad, like I think that we really diverge on these interesting points. I really want to understand what you're thinking. I have some really hard questions I want to ask you, but I feel like we're not ready to get there yet. Like, what would we need to, you can even discuss it with them. What do you think we need to do to get to the point where you would actually start to trust me and really ponder the questions that I have and listen to him? He may give you some suggestions that he himself will entertain.
Definitely. But Jake, that's all the time I want to spend on this call, because we do have some other callers I want to get to. Thank you so much for your questions. And good luck to you, sir. And congratulations on figuring out that path, because, I was in it. I was like, on campus, part of a Christian group doing that thing. I didn't go to seminary school, though. I feel like that's the next level that I might have gone down. But props to you for saying, hey, I actually can't vibe with this anymore, because that's hard. That is a hard thing to do. And, props to you for making that decision. Next, let's talk to some more people about street. We got a lot of calls about street epistemology. We'll do another one since we're still talking about it. I'm going to talk to Philip, who is calling in from Germany. Philip, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
I know this person, I think. Hi, Philip.
Hi, so does Dan.
How
I
are
was
you?
just figuring out the delay. Oh, I'm super fine.
Good. You know, I
Hope
don't
you're
think I've
doing
heard
well.
your voice. Maybe once. I know
No, you
this
didn't.
fellow. Philip, if this is the same, well, go ahead and ask your question, then maybe I'll get a little backstory. How about that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So Anthony kind of, I don't know, baited me into calling because he.
That's not fair. I didn't bait
what-
you.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I kind of thought about what to talk about, and because I wanted to call in, but I didn't want to just ramble on because it's sometimes what I like to do. So just thought about another topic, and now today, just on occasion, right before the show, like 1 or 2 hours, talked about Friends, and we talked about the Roe versus Wade case, and we also talked about, and I'm not going too deep into politics here, so I'm not forcing you to say anything. But we also talked about abortion in Germany and there, and at some point it just got into how to reach the people on the other side, just in the case of abortion, and maybe also in the case of COVID and whatever not. And there was like few of my friends who just, they were like, okay, but those people, like, they're just stupid. And it was like, I don't know how to get them and how to get to their point. And I just can't understand their point. They were literally like pretending like there was no way one could believe that point. Like one could believe a fetus was a person, or one could believe COVID conspiracy, whatever not. So the more we talked about them, the more I basically tried to explain to them how, starting from a different perspective, you could believe this stuff. And the only way to like get to them is not presenting different facts, but to go like to the level before that. And just by random chance, I started getting more and more into explaining what epistemology is to them, and studying street epistemology. And talking about street epistemology with them. And it was just so funny because the more we talked about them, the more they just seemed to kind of agree. And now thinking about it, I realized that especially with several of the conspiracies that are flowing around, it might be like completely unavoidable to reach those people, because if you're so deep into some kind of, I don't know, niche area where every information you get is already like colored so heavily, it might be impossible to reach you with data, and you need to get back like to the base level of how to evaluate.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what's your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't know the limits of human psyche. I don't know what is and isn't possible for people to come back from, if that makes sense, right? I don't know what the threshold is for us to like definitively say, yes, this person is going to be stuck in this belief and you can't possibly bring them out. I'm not sure. I'm sure that's true for some people. I wouldn't doubt that it's true for some people. I do doubt my own ability to judge that, because people can be very, very surprising. There are people who commented on my video when I was Christian who said that I was stupid and they couldn't understand why I was the way that I was. And here I am. So people can surprise you. And I wouldn't doubt the capacity of people to change their mind, personally. I do think it's harmful for discourse when we say, oh, these people are stupid, these people are trash, these people aren't worth your time, because those people do vote, right? So like, as long as they have that ability to change public policy, they're part of the influence, they're part of the culture. And so are they going to be harder to change minds on certain topics? Yeah, probably. But I think kind of like per our last conversation here, maybe the approach isn't to go so deep in the weeds on particular issues that you feel passionate about, but maybe it's about having that discourse about epistemology and about those narratives of how people come to their beliefs, those methodologies, and evaluating what works there. Because for a lot of people, again, these aren't casual conversations that they have with friends and family, especially if they're part of an extremist organization that feels the same way that they do about everything, and it becomes an echo chamber, right? It becomes they're less likely to encounter and have conversations like that. So I still think
even with the people who you think are so far out there that they would never change their minds, you should at least try. Because, are they going to change their mind in a single conversation? No. But again, you'd be surprised with how far people have come in changing. There's plenty of stories.
Just for clarity, I wasn't saying that like I can't change their mind. Just for some people, it seems like everyone is so focused on like a chain of 5, 6, 7 different premises, and they just argue from there. But both parties do that with completely different premises, and then just doesn't make any sense.
It's always easier to it's easier to throw out bullshit than to deconstruct it, right? Like somebody could throw bullshit out for 2 minutes and it could take an hour to explain why that's wrong, right? Like that's always going to be a problem. But I think that goes back to, well, maybe it's not about talking about the individual points and more going towards what's surrounding that bullshit. What's the base of the bullshit here, and what is the underlying implications of believing in that bullshit? So,
I just want to add real quick, like I'm still stuck on what you said at the start, like your friends didn't think that it was even possible to reach these people, and that could be maybe. I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Correct me if that wasn't what you're saying, Philip. But it's possible that they were engaging with people with whom they disagree using a different approach, and maybe they weren't even aware that they can use a questioning approach to make a little bit of progress. And one thing you could try, I don't know if it crossed your mind, but you could actually use SE to explore their views that these people are unreachable. And you can possibly even do some role play. Like, would you want to pretend to be the person who you think is unreachable, and let me try to engage with you? Now, you don't get a really accurate view of a person if you're role playing, right? It's just a representation. But it might be just enough to sort of demonstrate that maybe there is a way to get through to people, and you can teach this to your friends to do. I just wanted to add, Philip has been helping me improve the audio on my videos for years, and I'd mentioned to him that I was going to be on Truth Wanted, and
oh shit,
I suggested he call in because I think he really likes you, Dan, and Essie as well.
Well, that's nice.
I also asked Anthony if I wasn't calling, that he could ask you when the new Truth Wanted song's coming out, but never mind.
I forgot about that. I guess Philip's like he's a mixed guy.
No. Dan knows what I'm talking about. It's okay.
Yes, I know what you're talking about, Philip.
No, don't worry. No, don't worry.
Well, that's a conversation for behind the scenes that involves emails. So definitely email me on that, and we can go from there. But anyway, Philip,
don't worry.
I think that's all the time I want to give for this particular call, because we still got some other ones.
Last, like a really quick last one.
Real quick, Philip. Real quick.
Yeah, really quick. When I started talking about it, I just realized like it's super weird how, if you explain SE to someone else, it might sound a bit cultish and weird, because I was like, hey, but there's this guy online who's like really great, and he has discussion techniques, and he is like this, and it's called epistemology, and it sounded like I was talking about a pickup artist or some guru or something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But okay.
Criticism. Yeah.
Don't want to hold you off too long.
Thanks for spreading the word about SE, even though it might creep a few people out.
Right. Thanks so much, Philip. Appreciate you calling in tonight. But yeah, that could be, I guess that's anybody giving advice on the internet these days, right? Well, I guess no, because it is more, because like SE is about talking to people, and those pickup artists are all about like how to get laid, essentially. I mean, that's their goal there. But yeah, not the same thing. Definitely. So we have some other callers that we're trying to get to before the end. We are almost out of time. Just a reminder, for the first time, weirdly enough, I'm going to be recording right after the show some fun Christmas special stuff that's going to be coming up, and so I'm going to use that time tonight. But Anthony is going to be available for the after show. So if we don't get to you tonight, please go join in the ACA fan Discord server for that, and we'll be able to answer your questions there. Link to that's going to be in the chat if you're watching live, or in the description. So, but we're going to go ahead and talk to who we can next. We're going to talk to queer atheist who is calling in. Not queer. Now here's the thing. last time you called in, Queer Atheist, was on the Halloween special, and the call-in screener for your name, just put queer. So I said, "Hey, queer, you're live on the air," and everybody was giving me shit for that because it sounded like it was like a derogatory thing. It was like I was just reading the name. That wasn't anything wrong there. Queer Atheist was not on there. So Queer Atheist, you're live on Truth Wanted.
No,
what's up? Good to hear from you.
It's my Twitter handle, so it's easy to use and easy to remember. First of all, I wanted to say I read your announcement on Twitter, and you're going to do fine. You're going to be great at whatever you do.
Thank you. Appreciate
it. Yeah, Anthony, your essay approach has really changed a lot for me, and I really appreciate it. I want to say that the stuff that you put out for COVID was especially helpful. And whatever you need help with for launching SE into the wider world, I'm here to help. So whatever I can do to put my skills at nunchuckery to use, I will definitely help out. But
awesome. Thank you.
My question for the night. Yeah, and I mean that sincerely. I love SE, so whatever I can do to help, I will. My question was, what are your thoughts, just in general, and it's a really quick one, on the term New Atheism or the concept of New Atheism as put forward by like Dawkins and Dennett and Sam Harris and Hitchens. Whenever New Atheist is thrown out to me, I kind of feel like it's a pejorative, and I don't accept the label, but I'm curious as to what other people think.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you have any thoughts, Dan?
I have some thoughts. So, the New Atheist label, from what I've seen from people who have really written about this quote unquote New Atheist phenomenon, I agree with you, tend to use it in the pejorative, but also when they do use it in the descriptive, I find that it tends to be people who are outside the atheist movement trying to construct it as a category. In other words, people who aren't atheists trying to classify atheists into a collective, which is hilarious because if there's one thing atheists are good at, it's not agreeing on fucking shit. They're really bad about it, actually, historically speaking, in our movement. We're not good at it. And if you don't believe me, just go to twitter.com and just have at it, because there's all kinds of conversations happening every single day. Why this doesn't really work. But of course, you have to look at the demographics of atheists particularly in the United States, but also worldwide, and see that yes, there has been a change, and not only a change in people's religious belief, but also in the culture in which we talk about beliefs. And there are people online who identify as atheists and who have kind of been part of this thing called what could be described as the atheist movement, and who talk about atheism and who do it in different ways, right? So like, you have to acknowledge that that's a thing, because when people talk about it and say, oh, there's no like culture to atheism, well, I mean, there is, but it's very loose, and it doesn't mean that everybody who identifies as an atheist identifies with that as well, because it gets very particular, because it's so individualized. I think that's the problem with making these big classifications, because right now, in particular, I'll just point out the elephant in the room. There's a lot of people who talk about Richard Dawkins in not a very negative light right now. Don't get me started either. Right? But like, what was the thing? He was like this big figure for a long time. Him and other people who were kind of this leaders of this so-called New Atheist movement. So it's really fascinating to see how there has been this kind of churning in the sense of leadership. And from what I guess I could say I am in it now, right? Like, I'm obviously an activist, right? So I'm obviously talking about it. And from an internal perspective, I've seen a great change in what people generally think of as, who is leading this thing. They don't think of folks who are making appearances on Fox News arguing with Bill O'Reilly at night. They're thinking about big YouTubers, and they're thinking about, people who are, again, just online making podcasts, just talking about this stuff. And they're also, atheists now are much more involved in other social issues and this kind of umbrella
as well. You know, you see a lot of people making this sort of intersectionality now, which was also a big deal if you look at conversations online like 10 years ago, whether or not that was appropriate, because people were saying, well, atheism should only be about religious stuff. It shouldn't be about sexuality stuff. It shouldn't be about, you know, any of these other things. The truth is, as individual people, we can decide what we want to talk about and what we think is important. And religion is inevitably going to be related to a lot of these other issues. So I do think it's within the realm of appropriate conversation, but I haven't really heard anybody use the term new atheist anymore, besides like grumpy apologists online or something. You know, I don't think the general public really knows about the term. And I don't think as atheists, we should really care, because we can't even fucking decide what the word atheist means half the time, let alone whatever the hell new atheist means. Right.
Or if rocks are atheists.
Or if rocks are atheists, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, did you have any thoughts, Anthony?
Yeah.
Just a few that, like, I sort of came onto the atheist scene like around 2012, 2013, meaning the new atheists of the Four Horsemen, and then Boghossian with his book. Like, that stuff caught my attention, and it really appealed to me because I didn't see any of it in the culture. There was nothing about atheism until those guys broke down those barriers as far as I was concerned. Now, what's happened is there's been this influx of people getting into the atheist community. And you mentioned YouTube, and let's not forget TikTok. Like, I was at a convention a month ago in Salt Lake City of ex-Mormons, and the ex-Mormon TikTok scene is amazing.
Yes.
And so I think those guys, like, they were useful in their day. They really opened the door for this influx of content creators. And the convention that we were just at 2 weeks ago, Dan, the Faithless Forum. Yeah. There were, and I'm going to call them younger. There were these younger atheist content creators who are doing so much good work, and they're calling attention to some big problems that we're facing. And the cool thing from my perspective is they also saw the value of SE. They saw the value of not just agreeing to disagree, but challenging respectfully what it is you're hearing.
Yeah.
And I think the new atheists were all about, like, calling it out and ridiculing it. And there's this cartoon that every once in a while I surface. I'll retweet it again tonight. But it's like, you know, there's a theist saying something like, you know, shut up. And the new atheist says, no. And the new atheist says, why do you think that? And I think that sort of encapsulates it. So I think that it's been this progression, and who knows what the next wave of atheism will be. Maybe it will actually be sort of like, almost like a whimper, meaning, oh, there goes my doorbell. I'm sorry. I don't know why we're getting delivery right now, but I almost lost my train of thought. But, like, maybe what's going to happen is it will be so commonplace to be an atheist in the United States. That's my perspective. I'm coming from the US, that we'll look back at some of the efforts that were made to popularize atheism to the point that it's at today. And like, did we really have to do that? But that's what seemed to be necessary to get to the point we're at today. And I think it's really tempting to kind of like kick those guys to the curb and everything, but they had their place. They had their time. When we compare them to the standards of today, they seem woefully out of date. Like, they are out of touch. They are fucking out of touch. But I don't think would be where we're at today. I don't think I'd be here today if it wasn't for those guys. And I feel like I'm sort of in the center of it. Like, I've seen the new atheists, and I see like these younger people coming up, and just taking atheism and normalizing it to the next level. And it's been like a treat to watch. It's been a roller coaster. Don't get me wrong, but
I think definitely, I think we can say that because we're on the inside. Right. We're seeing the changes that happen internally. I do wonder what the external public really thinks about atheist world. Because here's something that's new. Here's something that's new that wasn't a thing before, which is everybody on the internet is much more comfortable with labeling themselves and associating themselves with all new kinds of labels. There is an entire movement that you've rightly pointed out of ex-Mormonism, of ex-Christianity, of ex-Islam that is entirely separate from the atheist movement. It has developed into its own phenomenon.
Right.
And why is that the case? Well, they have not always, there's a couple reasons, but one big thing is they have not always felt welcome in the atheist space, because when they think of atheists, they think of a neck-bearded guy on Reddit
getting mad at somebody and calling somebody stupid for believing in God. Like that stereotype is still very prevalent in people's minds, and that that nuance in the discourse sometimes isn't still there, which I think the atheist community has gotten a lot better at. I'll put as an asterisk. In my opinion, has gotten better at, because there's definitely some people that aren't as good. But like I think in the content space that I work in, I think people are pretty good at it, right? And so like I think that that has affected things, right? I think that polemic, that angry, that going out there busting heads kind of atheism, now even though it's out of favor, it has left repercussions on our movement that we are still dealing with the effects of, and we'll have to continue to deal with the effects of it if we really want to be taken seriously in the internet space as a whole, as we're now sharing our space with other folks who are going to organize themselves in their own communities. I think we have to legitimize ourselves by continuing to commit to, and whether it's an SE approach or just, a better approach to discourse than we have been, for sure. But those are my thoughts on that. Queer Atheist, did you have any takeaways?
Yeah, no, I was just going to agree with you. I think that, and I agree with Anthony as well. Like I think that we do owe that group a debt of gratitude for at least starting the conversation. But at some point it becomes kind of like your old racist grandma that you're like, okay, you know what? You're past your prime. You just,
oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what I think. I mean, like Dawkins is putting out all this transphobic stuff, and it just does not end. And I kind of reject that. So anyway, I just wanted to feel you out on that and hear your thoughts. Anthony, I will hook up with you on Twitter because I really want to be a part of whatever you do. So
okay, awesome. I'll look for you on Twitter then.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Queer Atheist, thanks so much for dropping into the show. And thank you for the kind words. I want to thank everybody that's called in tonight and everybody that's still in the queue. We're really sorry, but we are pretty much out of time.
Call next week
tonight, but you can call next week. Anthony will not be there, but I believe I'm scheduled for next week. Crew, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm on the schedule for next week. But like I said, I'm going to have to record some stuff right after this show, and I got to do that. But if you want to keep talking to Anthony and ask him your questions, you can do that right now on the fan server, the Atheist Discord fan server, and check that out there. But before we wrap up tonight's episode of Truth Wanted, I want to give a very special thank you to Anthony for being on. Anthony, thank you so much for everything that you do. It is a pleasure to call you a friend, and I'm really glad you got to be on the show tonight. Thanks, bud.
Thank you so much for having me on, dude. It's been a journey. I mean,
certainly has.
It has.
It certainly has.
And I'm sure, there's much more ahead of us much more ahead for us.
Thanks, I hope so. Yeah. So if people want to find you, where can they do it?
Well, we talked about Twitter. Just like do a search for me on Twitter if you're there, or if you're on Facebook. I'm still somewhat on there. Oh, there we go. Go to streetepistemology.com. Check out the website. Don't just look into my stuff. Like, there are lots of people out here. There are some great up and coming channels. I'm not doing SE anymore. We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm focused on more strategic stuff. So support the new content creators that are out there. If you go to streetepistemology.com and click on resources, I think on that page, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a link to a playlist. Like, if you're really into watching videos of people doing SE, you can watch, there's a playlist of the most recent uploads. And then the SE Discord server at the moment is one of the best places to go to get involved with projects and to talk with people who are interested in SE or concerned about it and anything in between.
Awesome. Yes, definitely check that stuff out. And if you want to support this show, there is a couple of ways you can do it. This show is live every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. So if you're listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, come check out a live show, particularly on YouTube, and give us a like, subscribe, leave a comment, engage with us. That always helps the YouTube algorithm and tells other people to watch this program. A couple of different ways to support the show also is through our Patreon. Patreon.com/truthwanted is a great way to support the show. You will get your name shouted out one of these weeks, and we will thank you for the support that you give for us on there.
Another way to do it is through our merch store. So if you check out that ACA merch store, links to that in the description. We got the shirts, we got the hoodies. It's hoodie season in America, baby. So check those hoodies out. And of course, stickers and masks and all kinds of other fun goodies for you to peruse at your own leisure. So do please take a look at that. This show is a part of the AEN Podcast Network, which is a group of shows all hosted under the atheist community of Austin. So if you like this show, hey, check out some of the other ones: Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, Nonprofit, Secular Sexuality, all kinds of good stuff is made in the network. So check those other shows out if you haven't already. You can contact me at truth@atheist-community.org, and you can follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan if you so desire. I have to never, ever, ever forget to thank our wonderful, spectacular, stupendous, incredible, amazing crew that helps make this show happen every single week. And the cats, several cats are involved in the production of every single show, except mine. He actively dismantles the show every chance that he get by jumping on my camera and stuff. So Pico is not a part of the production, but other cats are, and are much more responsible with their time. So thank you, cats and crew, for making these shows happen every single week. Anthony, before we wrap up the show, any words of wisdom that you want to give us?
Oh boy, words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom.
Don't just take what I say for granted with regards to SE. Like, try it out yourself, and maybe like, don't just go with the first one or two examples that maybe you stumble across. Be a little bit open. Be a little bit nuanced in what you're seeing and what what you're perceiving with regards to SE, and challenge us too. We're developing this thing, we're pushing it, but we're trying to do it in a really respectful way and evaluate your concerns and try to address them. But that's about it. I mean, thanks for having me on. I love Truth Wanda. I was watching it. I was listening to it, to your Halloween episode, as I was giving out candy and just cracking up. So,
it was a good episode. Not gonna lie, it was
awesome.
I like that one. No, thank you so much, and thank you again. A personal note to thank you so much for everything that you've helped me get to where I'm at, Anthony. You're a great guy, and I love having the chance to work with you whenever I can. So on that note, I want to close out the show. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
I love you, Dan.
Watch the nonprofits and join the hosts in the live chat Sundays at 3 p.m. Central between the Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.